What is up, everybody? It is your boy Lou Martinez, aka Big Chief Burrito, here with another live stream of Fireside Chats with Big Chief Burrito. This time in collaboration with my other cannabis-related channel, Pothead Etiquette. Content and information for every type of stoner. Hey, and today we're going to talk a little bit about two major topics in my life: food and weed. As if you couldn't notice before, I'm talking to Chef Jenn. It's funny, when I first spoke to her, I sent her a video that I did with Dr. Jenn, and she was like, oh, you had Dr. Jenn on the pod? I'm in. So we've had Dr. Jenn, now we're going to have Chef Jenn, and we're going to be talking about cooking, people's renewed love of cooking during the quarantine, and also cannabis cooking, mistakes that people make when beginning to cook with cannabis, and her career as a chef, the private events that she does, the private chef stuff that he does, the events that she has coming up that are now virtual. So, as always, thank you for watching. Thank you to the people that have been watching the streams. I want to remind you guys that if you are a fan, make sure that you follow us. Make sure that if you're watching this, you leave a like and a comment, a question for Chef Jenn. And make sure that you're following 2amburrito at facebook.com/2amburrito. If you watch stuff, just chatting, gameplay, live streamers on Twitch, you can follow us there at twitch.tv/2amburrito. You're going to notice a theme here. And on YouTube, you can catch all the replays, plus a lot of our old content, our short films, our feature films, our skits, sketches, tutorials, a bunch of other stuff on YouTube at youtube.com/2amburrito. As always, remember to like and share the stream, please. And joining us today, all the way from a cool room somewhere in San Diego, because she has a super fancy fan, it is Chef Jenn. Thank you for joining us, Chef. How you doing today?
I'm good. How about yourself?
There are no debates today, so we don't have to reschedule this, so I am doing fine.
I'm just happy we don't have any debates for a while. That first one was enough to, I don't know, put me off debate for the rest of my life.
Because you just kind of want to jump on there with like a plate of cookies. Here, each of you eat a cookie, relax.
I didn't even want to give them a plate of cookies. I wanted to shake the TV like they were 8-year-olds and tell them to go to their rooms. Like that, I was the mom in the front seat of the car, like ready to reach back and smack both the kids and be like, "We're not going to be there for an hour. Shut up."
All right. I want to make sure people know where they can follow you. We'll mention this a couple of times, but we have chefjenncooks.com is your website. That's what you posted. Yes. Is that one correct? And you can follow her on social media at Chef Jenn Cook as well.
Oh, Chef Jenn Cooks S.
Cooks.
It's okay. Someone tried to steal my name years and years and years ago, so I had to add in the word cooks. So right. It's fun. There
All right, cool. All right, and then I also want to remind people, since it came up on screen, that if you do listen, if you prefer the audio-only version of my interviews, they are available on podbean.com. Just look for Big Chief Burrito or 2AM Burrito. You'll be able to find us. You'll also be able to find us on Google podcast platform as well. Not iTunes yet because they're tricky, but everything else. All right, so let's jump into it, Chef. You are a personal chef, an educator, a cook. Where did this start for you? Did you always kind of, as a kid, did you have like an easy bake oven? Did you kind of discover later in life that you were into it? When did you start and get into this?
I have always cooked. It's actually kind of a running joke in my family that I burnt my baby blanket on the stove, and it quite literally, like, you know, the old electric stove coils, there's one burnt into my baby blanket. And I keep telling myself I'm going to frame it and put it up in my house. But yeah, I've always cooked. I've always had a passion for food. My whole life, whether it was like elementary school and, you know, getting sushi at the grocery store, or like, you know, just cooking for my friends, my whole life, it's been my passion. And I got really lucky that, you know, I went to junior college after high school, and I took one book-based culinary course because I needed some extra credits. And I ended up flunking out of all my other classes and acing that culinary class. And it was like a light bulb went off, like, oh, you don't just love to do this, like you need to do this for the rest of your life.
Do you need to have a love for all sorts of ingredients and types of cooking? Because I remember at a time, like, because I love cooking. My father and my mother taught me how to cook at an early age, and I kind of mastered a couple of like key recipes or whatever when I was younger that are my go-tos. But I was never like a big fish fan or like a fan of like a bunch of different things. If you are going to go into cooking as a profession, it's important that you don't have any of those sort of segments of the culinary tree blocked off, would you say?
Well, it's kind of interesting now because we as a society kind of narrow ourselves into all these different lanes. Like, I'm a vegan, I do paleo autoimmune, I only eat this, I only eat that. Like I have a friend of mine from Texas, and he'll come over to my house and be like, oh, you're a personal chef, be great, but like you cook healthy food and I won't eat it. You know, like there's people out there that they want a specific style of food. So I used to say, yeah, you needed to have like a really open palate and be really open to everything. But now I started kind of realizing that there's a little bit of something for everybody out there. So if your passion is soul food and you do it really, really well, even if you don't like certain things and you make it, like you can have a full on career doing that.
Just a niche market, so to speak.
Yeah. There's somebody for everybody, just like dating. Like, you know, there's a chef for everybody. There's a boyfriend for everybody.
The main thing that I kind of wanted to talk about, you know, in that, you know, 6 months ago, we all get locked down, right? And I think at first people were like, this just might be a couple of weeks. I'm just going to go ahead and get on this DoorDash and or Postmates. And after a couple of weeks, people were like, oh man, I spent $200 on tacos last week. Or like, oh man, like, and then there was sort of a shift after that to sort of, well, you saw all these like quarantine kitchens start popping up and all these other kind of things popping up. Did you sort of notice that as well, that there was like a renewed interest in cooking after the initial, like, oh, we're just going to bum it out at home for a couple of weeks?
Yeah, it was that weird moment. I think, honestly, it was less about like when they realized they spent all the money on DoorDash. And I think it was more about like the minute toilet paper disappeared. Right. Like the minute toilet paper disappeared, people started like suddenly realizing food could disappear. And then everyone just started grocery shopping and they had all this food in their fridge. And all of a sudden it just became this like, oh, wait, I have to cook this? Like I didn't just buy it, but I actually have to like use it. Oh, what do I do? And so, yeah, I would say every time I spoke to a human during that quarantine period, I spoke to them about food. Like every conversation I had with a human being, whether it was just like a random person that I met while like grocery shopping, like somehow I was having a conversation about food. And for me personally, it's a really weird, different side of the coin where like everyone fell in love with food and they started cooking. Whereas for me, I went through withdrawal. I didn't have people to cook for. I didn't have clients. I couldn't do dinner parties. So I put up the Quarantine Kitchen as a Facebook group because honestly, I wanted to help people. But if I can't cook for you, I need to connect through food somehow. And so the Quarantine Kitchen for the people in it was like this great resource to go to. Like I've had people who told me the only reason why they made it through quarantine is that they had that group to like talk to people about food and find that connection. And for me, it was the same thing, but from the other side of the coin, it was like I needed to find people to help. I needed to talk to people about food. I needed to post every day that my kitchen sink was empty. Like I needed people who cared enough to know that like on this day in 2020, I have actually done all the dishes in my house.
And everybody, you know, all of a sudden, you know, tries to maybe not successfully become an expert at something that they thought they knew. Like, for example, the homie Alex is watching. He says everybody started making some sourdough, which is true.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody all of a sudden was a fan of, you know, they're like, oh, I'll make sourdough. I'll do this. Yeah. How did it come out for you?
Oh, yeah. I got the sourdough starter from a friend of mine. And I was all gung-ho for this, and I was miserable. I will say, though, my mistake was the first night that I decided to make my sourdough was also my first night of virtual happy hour. I may have been a little drunk.
Do you find that what does a drunken cook add? About 15 to 20% per ingredient to what the recipe actually asks for?
A drunken chef does not follow the recipe.
Okay. That's where you start improvising.
Yeah, a drunken chef's just like, oh, flour? Okay. You know, like if it says 15 grams, I'm doing like, okay, I'll just do a quarter cup. Like I'm not measuring. I'm just throwing, yeah, I made a football and not a pretty football. Like my first loaf of bread was sad. It smelled amazing, but it was dense and it was hideous. And I quite honestly, I think I really, truly, I had a really bad recipe because every time I tried to make it, it came out as a disaster. So I loved sourdough pancakes. I really enjoyed that. But otherwise, yeah, I didn't need a child. Like I don't have kids, I don't have pets. The sourdough starter, like feeding that thing every day and making sure I had enough flour to feed it. Like it was, yeah, no, I'm good. I'm good on never having to make some sourdough again.
I think people basically went back default to like the easier things, right? Because what's something that people spend a lot of money on is like late night snacks, or they had a long day and they're just too lazy to cook and stuff like that. What course or meal of the day do you think that people got more into making during quarantine?
I would definitely have to say dinners because I feel like people, like you didn't have to go to work, so you really didn't have to get up early. So like breakfasts were more of like a weekend thing that you did fun with the kids. But I feel like honestly, everyone had the whole day at home to like prep and organize and get ready for a really nice dinner. I feel like everyone was really getting into making like some sort of nice dinner. I know at one point I was talking to a woman and her husband had just gone to like Costco and bought an entire like fillet, like not just the individual fillets, but like the whole loin. And her husband were just hacking off a couple pieces every night for dinner.
Just doing the same thing over and over?
It was like perfecting the perfect steak. Like they were like, okay, let's try it with butter tonight. Okay, let's try it with blue cheese. They were just having fun perfecting the perfect steak.
What's your go-to for steak, though? Do you prefer like grill only? Do you one of the people that kind of advocates for like grill and then broil or saute? What's your preference?
I am a scorchingly hot cast iron skillet, and I get a massive sear on the outside and then a ton of butter. Actually, recently, though, I have just switched over. I have now become a fan of the reverse sear, which means you're going to cook it to the internal temperature you want in a sous vide and then sear your steak. So I just started trying this out. I had a couple of ribeyes. I put them into a sous vide bag, which is basically a vacuum sealed bag. I put a stick of butter, a couple cloves of garlic and rosemary, cooked it for about an hour until I got it to about 120 degrees, and then took that cast iron skillet and seared the outside of it with more butter and garlic. And it was amazing.
So it's like a reverse. You're cooking it from the inside out, basically. Is this what's happening?
Yeah. Yeah, it's referred to as a reverse searing technique. So instead of like searing the steak outside and then cooking it all the way through, now you're cooking it all the way through and then searing and getting a crust on the outside.
Oh, okay. But that almost feels like you're microwaving it. Almost like microwaving a steak.
It's kind of the concept of microwaving where the waves cook from the inside out. But what you're actually doing is you're putting it into a vacuum sealed bag, and the vacuum sealed bag is creating heat that circulates around the outside of it. And then everything that's in that bag is what flavors the meat. So inside of that bag is butter and garlic and rosemary. So all of those flavors, no matter how much I try to marinate, no matter what I do, that fat and those flavors go straight down into the middle of that steak. I have flavor all the way through, and then I can sear it on the stove.
And how long does that usually take, or how long do you cook it for?
It took about an hour in the sous vide, and honestly, it took a total of 2 hours because I had to defrost the steak because I had some frozen leftovers. And then, yeah, it's about an hour in the sous vide, and then you sear it on the stove for like 5 or 6 minutes, and it's done. It honestly, it's not for people who want to cook a steak and forget about it all day. It's honestly if you want to plan a dinner.
Okay, so it's like, special occasion type deal. You want to be able to be on it. Yeah. Okay, what do you pair that with?
I'm all about like a really good red wine to go with it. Like honestly, as much as I don't drink as much anymore because I prefer cannabis to alcohol, I still need a really good glass of wine, a good glass of red wine to go with steak.
I would pair that with like 2 blunts and and a couple of bonglos while I was cooking in the kitchen, probably.
I would probably start smoking while it's like doing the 1 hour in the sous vide. But I honestly, since March, I have pretty much given up on large blunts, large joints. Like I am now down to like micro joints. I don't like smoking anymore. My throat hurts. And I have to be totally honest with you, like without sharing a joint for 6 months and without really smoking for 6 months, I'm the healthiest, least sick I have been in years. Like I haven't had the common cold. I haven't been I normally am that person who gets sick really easily. And I feel like I've almost like cleaned out my lungs and like did a 1-over. So I'm all about consuming cannabis. I'm all about topically using cannabis, and like I even smoke like little tiny joints, but like I don't really smoke much anymore.
Now if you made that steak and you added canna butter, would you
Yep.
sort of get would you be able to do that? Would you add that into the bag, or would you add it to later on when in the skillet?
You'd add it into the bag because the temperature in the bag is never going above 130 degrees. So you're not cooking off any of that cannabis or any of the THC. You're combining it. The only thing with putting it into the bag that's going to happen is that the fat inside that steak will absorb the butter. The whole meat will not absorb it. So if you just seared it on the stove with canna butter, you could end up cooking off some of the cannabis because you get the temperature really high. And if you did the canna butter in the sear, you may not get much of the THC in the meat. Really the best way if you're looking to add cannabis to a dish, in that case, I would have made like a compound butter, like a mixture of butter and garlic and lemon zest and rosemary, and then cut a slice of that butter and put it on top of the meat. So I had that melted cannabis butter to like dip the steak in and knew exactly what my dosing would be and knew exactly how much I was getting with that steak.
When you started your training and you realized that was kind of what, you had an inclination for it, you like you said, it was the class that you passed. Is there a specific like for acting, I might say like Uta Hagen technique or a different kind of more famous acting teachers, like their specific techniques? Are there sort of branded or kind of OG cooking ways to learn how to cook that have been in place for a long time? And are there like more modern ways of learning, or which one applied to you?
Honestly, I've kind of absorbed everything. So I did do the 1 year at junior college, and then I went off to culinary school. I got a 4-year bachelor's degree in culinary arts. I also got a bachelor's degree in culinary nutrition. And then I went overseas and I worked in Italy and England, went to wine school in Germany. I'm that kid who just doesn't want to stop learning. So like, yes, there's classical French technique. I learned that. I learned all my mother's sauces. I'm very well versed in the classical French cooking style, but I also learned techniques from Asia. I've grown up 45 minutes from Mexico, so I fully understand like Baja style versus Sinaloa versus Southern Mexico. Like I'm really like well versed in my Asian and ethnic cuisine. And then of course now we have modernists, and so that's like the talking about sous vide and that whole new wave and new style of cooking. For me, I guess, I can't say I'm one or the other. I'm kind of this beautiful melding. I guess in a film term, kind of like Tarantino, how he picks and chooses from all the old school styles he likes and blends it and creates his own style. That's kind of me. I pick and choose. Like I'll do a classic, French sauce called a beurre blanc, but then I add in lemon zest, and corn zest. Not traditionally classic, very Southern California. We have beautiful citrus here. I personally like to just say I do modern California cooking. I'm born and raised California. I reflect that in my food, whether it's using cannabis in my food or whether it's using classical French cooking techniques. I am 100% representing California in the way that I cook.
What is the dish that that feels most like home to you? Like reminds you of like, growing up as a kid. What is like what's your go-to, like, just that makes you feel like you're safe and at home?
Well, if it's something that all right. So again, I told you I'm really weird in California. So my family's originally from New York. So for
Mhm.
me, it's got to be like matzo ball soup when I'm sick. But at the same time, I also grew up in Southern California. So I want matzo ball soup. I want miso soup, and I want like tortilla chicken soup. Like I want all three.
All three.
Like that's like my comfort. Like I need a bowl of each. Yeah, I love a good burrito, like a carne asada
Yeah.
burrito. If it's done right, that's definitely my happy place. Street tacos are the happiest place, but then like just straight up raw fish, like really good sushi, really good sashimi, really good seafood in general. That's definitely a comfort place for me. And then there's probably one dish in my career that I've made for my entire career, and that would be braised beef short ribs with red wine. And
Mm.
so that's my all-time comfort. That's something I've probably made for 20 years and could make with my eyes closed, and it's where I find my happy place.
Um, Alex asked, and he's a friend of mine that pronounces himself a great chef, although it's still to be determined. But he asked, do you have a cookbook, or have you ever thought about making one, or or is that kind of basically why people would follow you on your social medias and stuff like that?
So I've a cookbook has honestly been on my like to-do list for years. And with quarantine, I made my first actual effort into writing a cookbook. If anyone has ever tried to write a cookbook, you will know that it is not an inexpensive process and not an easy process. It takes a lot of like, rewriting, retweaking, editing photos. So I did what I call like a micro cookbook. So I did a small 6 recipe cookbook. It's available free through my website. And it is all about seafood. It's called Other Fish in the Sea. And it's specifically seafood recipes based on like seasonal seafood in Southern California. But it gives you the possibility of like how to make it with any seafood that's available where you are.
Okay, excellent. Now, what part of New York did you grow up in?
I grew up in San Diego, but every summer was spent in Long Island. My grandfather had a factory in Brooklyn. I still have cousins in Manhattan. So I am the most California New Yorker in the world.
Oh, I might have to argue with that on that. But why is it that, and New York is culinary capital, obviously, and San Diego and California. I think, like, for example, I like it when California cooks don't try to directly mimic like other kind of styles. Like I appreciate more when California makes pizza that's California-ish as opposed to trying to imitate Chicago or New York style pizza. But one thing that I really haven't been able to find in San Diego is equivalent Chinese food to New York. Have you noticed that?
So what is really different about California in terms of Chinese food is when Chinese food started in New York, really it wasn't for Chinese people. It was for New Yorkers. So it was flavors and sauces and things
Right, it was.
Let's be honest, anything that's in New York is for New Yorkers. Like if New Yorkers don't want it, it leaves, and it leaves quickly. So the food that you get in New York is going to be, your incredibly red, sweet and sour sauce is going to go with egg rolls and lo mein noodles, and it's going to be kind of an Americanized Chinese. Whereas in California and on the West Coast, a lot of our Chinese food was for Chinese people. So you're going to get really good kind of Szechuan style or Northern China, Southern China. You're going to get regional Chinese food. Finding what I refer to as shitty Chinese, which is what New York Chinese food is, it's shitty Chinese food. That's really hard to find. Although I will say there's this one kind of in between that just recently opened. It's called Fortunate Son. It's on Adams Avenue. It is owned by the people who have born and raised in Ironside. So it's a little bit bougie, but they're definitely mimicking classic Chinese. Like you are going to get shrimp with walnuts, and you're gonna get like some egg rolls and some like classic dishes just done.
As long as they got some general shows there, I'm like,
I haven't seen their most recent incarnation. They only opened maybe a month ago, so they're still kind of hashing out the final menu. But yeah, I mean, I will say, if I'm going to do anything, I live on El Cajon Boulevard, and we have Maxim's Chinese, and it is like your old school shitty Chinese place. It really is. And I get sweet and sour pork, and I love them because they deep fry the pork, and then they serve this like the sweet and sour sauce that literally like is Jello. It's not even like liquid. It's Jello. It's got so much cornstarch in it. And they serve the sauce on the side, so I can kind of toss it and make it my own. So it's always crispy and amazing.
Is there a style of food that you haven't mastered yet that's kind of like your goal? Or, I mean, if you had to be like, okay, I'm on a cooking competition, I don't want to get this. Or do you want to not tell your rivals that so they don't?
No, I would probably say honestly, like Filipino food, I really haven't mastered. Like, I like Filipino food. I like adobo chicken. It's not something that I've really played with yet. So yeah, I think if there was like one style of food that I know that I enjoy eating, but I really have no clue how to cook some of it. And quite honestly, there's some stuff in there that like, please don't give me balut, for the love of God. Like, I don't ever want to eat a half-hatched chicken, please. I've eaten horse, I've eaten duck, I'll eat anything. Just don't give me something with feathers that's delicious.
How do you feel about like gamey meat, like elk and moose and stuff like that?
I love that stuff, quite honestly. It's really funny because I think as I've like progressed in life, my palate has changed. Like, my ability to like those flavors has changed. And I think that just comes over time. I think for a lot of us, we're just really used to factory farm meat. And so we're used to chicken that tastes like nothing. We're used to steak that tastes like nothing. We're used to pork, like we're used to animals that don't have a flavor. And so unless you've grown up understanding that like chicken is supposed to taste like a game bird, like meat is supposed to have a distinct flavor to it and minerality and different components to it. So I personally love it. I've grown to fall in love with it. I know it's not everybody's thing, and I know it takes some people a really long time to get used to.
I've never been. I don't know. I think it's just kind of the way I grew up. But steak, chicken, pork, etc. But I've always been sort of afraid to venture into that. I'm coming over. You're making bison burgers. What do you tell me to put me at ease? Before I take that first bite.
So my trick to a bison burger is I always put a fried egg on top. Like, that's my trick. So bison, first of all, is incredibly lean. So you want to add more richness and more fat to it. And you throw a fried egg on it, and suddenly everyone's comfortable and happy with a fried egg in their sandwich. Like, let's just be honest. Who says no to that? So I think adding something to it that's going to make someone more comfortable and more familiar, like cheese, fried egg, that kind of thing. And then it's less about like, it's not that it's buffalo, it's not that it's ostrich, it's not that it's duck. It's more of like, this is just a really good burger. Try it. Like, to me, I feel like the minute you tell someone that like, oh, this is birria, this is goat, like the minute they hear the word, they instantly don't want it. But if you like one of my best friends, the first time I had like a beef tongue, she had like a big pot of beef tongue stewing on the stove that her mom was making. And she cut off a chunk and gave it to me. And I'm like, oh, this is delicious. And then she like opened the lid of the pot and let me look at it. And I was like, oh, hell no, I didn't eat that.
Looks like a horror movie where it tastes like heaven though, right?
Say that again?
I said it looks like a horror movie, but it tastes like heaven though.
It's the best roast beef you will ever have. Like, honestly, I love beef tongue. I think it's amazing. And there's actually there's a new butcher shop that just opened up in IB, and all they sell is Wagyu beef, and they actually carry Wagyu beef tongue. And that's my next like big venture to play in my kitchen, like some high-end, super expensive Wagyu beef tongue.
How do you feel about these restaurants that make these like $6,000 burgers where they add like the gold leaf and the truffle butter and and stuff like that. It seems more like a influencer thirst trap than it really actually like a culinary experience. Have you ever tried any of those? Is it just kind of just way overrated? Like there's no reason to really explore it, right?
I think it's real. Like I'll tell you right now, like I've had some really expensive, really bougie stuff. Like I've gone to a restaurant where they take eggs and they let them sit, like fresh eggs from a chicken. Like they have their own chickens. They take the eggs, they put them into a mason jar with giant hunks of black truffle, and then they let it sit for 12 days so that the flavor of the truffle imparts into the egg. And then they take that egg with the most luscious cream ever. They make scrambled eggs. They put it on a super rich piece of brioche bread and then shave more chocolate on top. I mean, that one dish is like $30 and it's amazing. But I do not see the point in someone giving me a hamburger with truffle and gold leaf and caviar and like a skewer through it that has a diamond on the end of it. Like, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's a thirst trap. It's the same thing as like those Bloody Marys where they were like putting a chicken wing and a tiny hamburger and a jalapeno and a stuffed popper. Like, no, like all you're looking for is more Instagram followers. You don't want to eat it.
Yeah, it's more of an event than it is, you know. Plus, if you have $5,000 to spend on a burger, you got bigger issues there. You probably want to. There's a million other things.
$5,000 to spend on a burger. Fly yourself to like Australia. Go to a Wagyu beef farm and let the farmer feed you the greatest burger of your life. Like, do not waste it in Las Vegas on some shishi hamburger with a chunk of gold leaf on it.
Nobody's going to remember that you're going to take a picture of, and then it's going to be done, right?
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that I feel like even just talking about that now with where we're at in life, like I feel like that's just so beyond anything anymore. Like I don't feel like anyone I know right now, if they had that kind of money to spend, would spend it on something that just magically disappeared. I feel like everyone now is like realizing like after you've been locked in your house for a while, like if I've got $5,000 to spend, I'm going somewhere. I'm doing something. I'm going someplace. I'm not buying a stupid hamburger.
I mean, just my quick math just tells me that $5,000, that's 10,000 tacos at Jack in the Box. So you could feed San Diego for that.
I mean, I don't know if like 10,000 people would actually take those tacos, but yeah. I mean, we could go to the taco shop and buy 10,000 tacos and everyone would eat them. I could do that.
Where do you fall on like for me, for example, like when I was a kid, I went to a lot of Italian restaurants and a lot of stuff, and I used to love veal. And then I came to a point where I was like in my teens or whatever, and I realized what veal was, and I just made, and I don't make a lot of, I eat meat, I eat hamburger, I eat stuff all the time, but for everybody has their own internal like line on stuff. And I was like, as much as I love this, I think I'm going to give it up because I just don't agree with it. Where do you fall? And I know it's different for every chef. I think more modern people are more like but like stuff like foie gras, like things like that might not be that, might be something that, you know what I mean? Like where do you land on that spectrum of kind of making a decision on which of those things you actually do and don't do?
So one of the things with being a chef that's really amazing and special to me is that I've gotten to be able to go to I've gotten to go to where my food comes from. So like I've been on a boat with fishermen. I've been to a farm that sells pork. I've been to these places and met the people that raise these animals. And to me, if I know that where these animals are coming from is a really good place and they're not being tortured, they're not being like treated improperly, I'm happy to eat it. On the other end of the spectrum, like even that cow that you're eating, that steak that came from Costco, like that cow could have never seen a blade of grass in its entire life. Like it could be a factory farmed cow and be just as much in distress as a piece of veal. So to me, it's less about whether it's foie gras or veal or like, the fact that octopus are intelligent and blah, 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 blah. Like to me, if an animal is ethically, sustainably sourced, I don't see any reason in not eating it. And,
talk to us a little bit about your sort of career as a personal chef. I mean, you started off, you started traveling, you started learning all these different techniques. When do you settle back into Southern California and sort of decide that that this is, and start making that transition to being like a personal chef, classes, events, stuff like that?
The universe really picked that out for me, to be totally honest with you. So I was living in England. I was working at a health farm, which is essentially a spa. And my visa had expired and it was time for me to come back to the States. I got a job working at the Deepak Chopra Center at the La Costa Resort and Spa. And I was doing all the high-end meals for the people who were coming in to eat Ayurvedic and to live this lifestyle. And a week after I started the job, the executive chef quit and left. And then half the staff left with him. And they took me from like my dream job to like working the 4 a.m. to 4 p.m. shift in like this like horrible lunch restaurant. And I was there probably 2 weeks, and I went to go to a Padres game, and I fell down a flight of cement stairs and I hurt my back. And I went to a chiropractor and he was like, you can't work in a kitchen anymore. Like, you can't lift a 50-pound pot. You can't do this. You can't do that. So besides the fact that like I had like a really crappy job that I didn't like and I had hurt my back, it was like, okay, the universe is telling me something. I need to get out of a kitchen. I was probably out of culinary school, God, maybe 2 years. And it was just really evident to me that like a restaurant was never going to be my thing. So I applied to Great News in PB. It was a local cooking school at the time, and they were looking for assistants. And like what was supposed to be like a 3-week job till I figured out what I wanted to do was a 1.5 years. And I left there and I worked for adult ed, and I started teaching, and I got a part-time job working for like a couple of local catering companies. Like, to be honest with you, at this point, I've worked for every catering company in San Diego. But I was catering for a client one night who had gotten me to a catering company. And at the end of the night, he's like, we like you. We don't ever want to deal with a catering company again. And that was pretty much when it was like, okay, I now work for you and not them. Like, you are going to pay me nicely and I like you. And now this is my job. And so I kind of went from teacher to caterer to personal chef. And honestly, all of that just kind of came together. So now I do private dinners in people's homes. I do virtual cooking classes. I do educational events. I have to be honest, like the time of COVID has never made me more grateful for my job, because I now get to help people celebrate all of their special occasions. Like if it's a birthday party, if it's an anniversary, people who maybe don't want to go out to a restaurant. I had a couple, she was a nanny, and it was her boyfriend's 30th birthday, and she didn't want to go out to the restaurant. So I brought everything to set up an outdoor mobile kitchen, and we did an entire dinner in the courtyard of their apartment complex.
A lot of looky-loos, a lot of people coming by, like.
I'm not gonna lie, there was one neighbor who was doing her laundry, and I feel like she extended her laundry like an extra 1.5 hours, so she could just walk by constantly checking things out.
Wafting in the air. Does politics ever get in the way of cooking? Like do you ever cook for somebody and they're like, this burger is good, just as good as Trump's tax cuts, like or something like that? Do you ever kind of?
I will say, like I had a really hard time once, and I definitely know that some of the people I've worked for have different political opinions, but hands down, I was with a family for an entire month. They had rented a vacation home here in San Diego for a month. It was the entire family. So grandma, the 3 kids, their grandkids, like the whole family. And we got say that again?
I said one of those Illuminati mansions in like Mission B. Okay.
Yeah, right on the water in La Jolla. It had a tennis court on the roof. It came with a golf cart. It had an underground movie theater. Yeah, this was like, this is one of those like Illuminati houses. Like you were waiting for a helipad. Yeah, right. It was crazy. Obviously, they had enough money to buy me for a month. So yeah. So we were really good, and every week we did one dinner where it was like specifically like using foods from California, and I would tell them everything about the dish. And like the last night I was there, I was like, hey, look, we've done like every region of California. I'm going to do all Baja. So this is like Baja wines, Baja cheeses. Like I want to do this really cool Baja style dinner. And grandma looked at me and was like, no, we don't do stuff from that side of the border. Like, we're going to watch Fox News tonight and you're not doing that. And I was like, oh, and like as my assistant, who is like first generation across the border from Tijuana, is standing next to me, my skin crawled. And I was just like, at least I've known you for 30 days and I know you're a decent human. You just have really dumb thoughts.
Just check your phone, make sure that check cleared real quick. Like, okay.
Yeah. All right. I will say though, honestly, since COVID and life has become a little bit different, I've had this conversation with my mom because I've been really vocal on social media about my political opinions. I've been, Black Lives Matter posted all over things. I've been, posting about political stuff and really letting it be known how I feel about the environment, how I feel about cannabis, how I feel about our current government. And, my mom's really old school. Like she works with a lot of construction people. And so she's like, oh, I can't talk about that stuff. I'd lose clients in a heartbeat. And I will say some of my first clients after quarantine, like they followed me on social media. I came into the house. They're like, just to let you know, there are no Trump supporters in this home. You are more than welcome. Like my political opinions have actually helped my business, I think, at this point.
Excellent. I mean, Republicans kind of, they like that potato salad with just a little tiny bit of salt, nothing else, maybe sometimes, right? Do their taste buds sort of skew towards more plain stuff?
Yeah, I learned very quickly, like with my business, I'm not like I'm not an Amazon purchase. Like you don't go online, click a button and have it delivered. Like I have a phone call with people. We talk about your menu. We create what you're going to do. So very quickly, like, honestly, it's kind of my way of vetting people. Like if you can't have a phone call with me and you don't like my personality, this isn't going to work.
So it's a vetting process both ways. They have to know what you're bringing to the table, and you also want to make sure. I would assume that it seems like a very personal thing to go into somebody's home and sort of open up your, everything that you've learned all the years, because I don't think that it's something that you could do without passion, where it's like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, boom, here, eat it, buy it. It seems like it's something more like you're putting yourself out there. So I think that that vetting process probably goes both ways, right?
Oh, most certainly. And I think honestly, with where I'm at with my career, it's kind of gone beyond just the food. Like I have worked in 5-star establishments. I have worked in higher echelon places. So I'm at the level now where like we did a New Year's Day party for an incredibly wealthy family. Like I didn't realize how wealthy they were until we were trying to schedule an appointment for me to come and look at the home. And I got a phone call like 15 minutes before we were supposed to meet to let me know that there was some turbulence and the plane couldn't land yet. And they would be meeting me about 10 minutes late. They had flown in to meet me for the consultation to talk about their New Year's Day football party that they were dropping a couple of grand for friends to do.
Gas up the jet, Buffy.
Yeah.
We have to go meet Chef Jenn.
That was kind of it. And the way that I look at things is I'm coming into your home, so I'm going to be like family. So, we're there first thing in the morning. We're trying to be dead silent to make sure that like New Year's Day, we're not waking anyone up. But the minute that like we hear someone in the house, there's baking, cooking, coffee making, and people know that we've turned the house into a home. And the minute we got that coffee pot on, some guy came downstairs and he was an older gentleman, like in his late 60s, and he was going to go for a run and he couldn't figure out how to get his watch on. And no matter what I was doing, I stopped what I was doing. I walked over and I helped him put on his watch. Like, I'm not just there as like, I'm cooking for you. I'm here to like make your entire thing a convenience. I'm here to help you. I'm here to be a part of your day. So whether it's like, I'm there with an assistant and you come in the house and you've got things in your hand, my assistant knows to stop whatever he's doing and he helps you unload whatever's in your hand. Like I am beyond just like, I don't just come in and cook for you. I become a part of that experience.
You become part of the staff, basically, like part of their team.
Yeah, I mean, but it's really funny because when you get to a certain point of wealth, I've come to realize that like when you get to a certain level of money, your staff isn't staff. Your staff is like an extra component of you. Like it sounds strange to say, but like, you know, at the base level, like you're hiring a housekeeper and your housekeeper comes and cleans your house. When you're at the point where you own like 27 acres in Rancho Santa Fe, your housekeeper lives on property.
Yeah, and there's those types of people that like don't even check their own email or make their own appointments. They have a living person that is their schedule keeper, or that is which to me it's like, you know, like you don't even check your email. Read that to me, please. Okay, excellent. Okay, respond. Things like that.
I've had many of those people reach out to me that are like, yeah, I'm scheduling a party for someone. Like I've had several events that I've never even spoken to the actual person I'm cooking for until the day I get there.
So when you set these things up, do you how has the sort of specificity of what people want and don't want in their meals changed with, like, you know, I don't know if it's something new, but people more aware of like gluten allergies, vegans, keto, like different type things. Like when you show up to a house like that, it could be like, oh, well, our 15-year-old daughter is vegan and this guy only eats, he's on a carnivore diet this week, and Joey can't have peanut butter and stuff like that. How do you keep that all in line when you have these big gigs?
So it's interesting. That's honestly like, that's my niche. Like what you just described is exactly what I've made a career out of. So when I went to culinary school, I had to do an interview as part of like part of my associate's degree. We had to go out into industry and we had to meet a chef and we had to sit down and interview them. It was kind of like this idea of like, okay, you need to know what your future is going to hold. So you need to talk to someone who's already doing it. And I went to a really high-end spa in Escondido called the Golden Door. And I went and talked to the executive chef there. And when him and I started talking, and this was like, I don't even want to talk about how old I am, but this was early 2000s. And it was like the future of food is people looking about their health. They want to know what's in their food. They're going to be really concerned about their diets. Like if you're going to go anywhere with food, you need to understand nutrition. So that's why I went back after I got my culinary degree and got a second degree in culinary nutrition. And so now it's kind of my niche. Like I did a dinner party for a group of 6 people. And it was like, we had like 2 vegans, 1 gluten-free vegan, 1 gluten-free vegetarian. Like we ended up doing a dinner for 6, but they were almost like 6 different meals. And so I've really learned how to take one item and switch out a couple of ingredients and switch out a little bit here and there, and how to make something that works for everybody.
So you start at step 1 and then you realize in your brain that at step 3, for half of it, you have to substitute this. For half of it, you can go on your own way. And that's a lot of pots and pans, it seems like.
It can be, but if you do it really wisely, like I just recently did a dinner party. They were gluten-free. It was 4 people and 1 person was dairy-free. So it really was like, okay, well, I'm going to do roasted vegetables and I can't do a starch that's like pasta. So I'm going to do roasted potatoes and like, okay, well, I'm going to do a puree to go onto the plate, but I can't use butter. So I can use a vegan butter and use it for everybody. I can use coconut milk and use it for everybody. But then I want to make a really beautiful sauce. So that sauce is going to be done, some of it with butter, some of it without butter. And then even like the steaks that I put into the oven, I put butter on all the steaks that I knew weren't for the butter-free person, and then put a piece of rosemary on top of each one. So I knew which ones had butter. And then the ones that didn't have butter didn't have anything on top of it. So it's just, I guess as I'm saying it, I can hear how complicated it sounds. But in my mind, I'm like, what? I just put this over here and do this right here. And yeah, it's normal for me.
This is like, I mean, it's essentially the equivalent of setting up a shoot for a film, for something that I do, which is, okay, we're going to shoot this scene first. But we got to remember that at this point in the scene, she's crying, even though we're going to shoot the other part of the scene later because we need a different light, this and that, and all the other stuff. So to somebody like me that does it all the time, that's like, it's a controlled chaos that you have in your mind.
Yeah. It really, once you do it, you start to understand like the juggling routine of like, okay, the first thing I do when I get on site is I make either a cheese board or a salad. Like I get all those components together because I know the first thing is that first course. And if the first course isn't ready as soon as they want it, then I'm screwed for everything else. So you get the first course ready, and then you start working on all the other components. And then once you get everything kind of like neatly organized, then you just start working backwards and filling in the gaps. It's just like this, it's like a game of chess. Everyone has their strategy. And once you get it down, you know how to move your pieces so you win.
Oh, and then the win is when you get that itis later when you're sitting there just like, there you go.
Yeah.
That was good.
The number of times I get clients at the end of the night that are like, oh, if you want a drink or if you want, you want to like sit down and have a meal, blah, blah, blah. Like they're, really nice people along the way. And I'm like, look, I have lazy man syndrome. I have a glass of wine or a bite of food and I want to go to bed. So like, thank you very much. I'll go home and do that on my couch and smoke a joint and pass out.
That sounds like a plan. Going back to kind of what we talked about earlier about people rediscovering kind of a love of cooking, and you as an educator, where do you think like did you like you said, you've been busy during COVID and whatnot, but did you find it just as fulfilling to be able to teach virtually versus being in somebody's kitchen, or what was the adjustment for you mentally for that process?
It's really weird because I've always loved teaching. Like, I started really, my first thing when I got out of restaurants was I went into adult ed and I started teaching. And honestly, the teaching never made as much money as the personal chef work. So I always kind of put the teaching to the side. And now that like we're doing this whole virtual teaching thing, it's actually really become really satisfying for me. Like I'm teaching more kids. So I'm doing a lot of high school classes. I'm helping people to celebrate. So I'm doing like a cheese board class where everyone can come in, make a cheese board, hang out, have a glass of wine, hang out with their friends. The only thing that's really gotten to a point where I had to get used to was like just not having people in front of me. I've had to remember what it was like. Like honestly, I've had to remember what it was like to teach a cooking class to a group of people that have no personality. Like I just have to pretend I'm in front of an entire classroom full of people with no personality. And then I can just, be the shining star in the room and fake it and love it and be cheerful and everyone still has a good time.
No, it makes sense. I recently spoke to some actors who were doing a virtualized play reading via Zoom for a cause, and they were reading a play, and I've seen comedians that are doing like Zoom comedy and doing all these things, but I don't see how there's certain artistic or educational things where you sort of want that reaction, where you want to hear that wow moment, where or people like reacting, laughing, etc. I guess that would be the part that you would miss, or people maybe having a question, but maybe being afraid to voice it, where if they were right there in front of you, they might be like, hey, can you take a step back or things like that?
Well, that's the other really interesting component. Like the first thing is, as whether you're a comedian or an actor, any kind of performer, you've been on a stage in front of a really bad crowd. Like every actor, every person who's ever done it, you're going to go out there and there's going to be a night where the crowd is dead and you still have to make it work. So that's the first component of it. And then the second one is honestly just altering it. Like now I know if I'm talking about something, I have to stop after each step. Like I can't be like, okay, so we're going to open this box and then we're going to pull out something and then we're going to light it. I have to be like, okay, so first we're going to open the box. Did everybody open the box? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, we've all opened the box. Great. So now I want you to pull out your joint. Great. Okay, does everybody have a joint? Wonderful. Now don't forget, you need to have a lighter too. So get your joint and you just have to learn to get your joint and your lighter. But yeah, it's a skill. And once you I know how to teach. So now I just have to expand that teaching skill to go a little bit more in depth, to slow down, to ask people questions, to check in with people. And I mean, as any educator, you can create an environment where people feel comfortable enough to ask you questions and comfortable enough to be involved, then you're a really good teacher.
Tell us a little bit about the pumpkin spice cheesecake, trifle, and white chocolate cocktail cooking class. That's a handful. That's a mouthful and a half.
So I've been doing these kind of periodic, like open to the public cooking classes so that people don't have to hire me privately. It's an opportunity for anyone, anywhere in the world to log in virtually and take a cooking class. And this one is specifically designed for people to be able to cook along with me. And quite honestly, it's not even cooking, you're just layering. So it's a really easy fall dessert. So one, it's ice cold. So it's 90 degrees in fall in California. So it's perfectly temperatured for us. It's got pumpkin spice in it. So it's all the flavors that you want in fall. It's technically made like a cheesecake. So it's rich and delicious. And then for those people where it's actually cold, we're going to make a white hot chocolate, but we're going to add those into it. So it's an adult beverage.
Right, and I am posting the link there in the comment section on YouTube, Twitch, or Facebook for you guys to follow and take a look at that event. I want to keep talking to you because I have a bunch of other questions specifically as it relates to cannabis cooking, etc. But we need to take a really quick break here because I need to go check up on my dad. And now that you mention it, I do not have my lighter. So I don't know if you noticed, I've been looking around. I know it's over there sometime. So we're going to keep talking to Dr. Jenn in like literally 90 seconds. You can follow her.
Dr. Jenn.
Oh, sorry. Chef Jenn. Sorry. I get my Jenns mixed up. Chef Jenn. We're going to keep talking with, she's a doctor of cooking. No, I'm just kidding. I'm trying to justify that. No, Chef Jenn. And we're going to put up her site here, Chef Jenn Cooks. You can also follow her across social medias at Chef Jenn Cooks. I added the S there for you. And I want to talk a little bit more about just cooking, your life as an educator and as a chef, and kind of about the mistakes that people make when they begin to cook with cannabis. Obviously, it's been legalized recently in a lot of states, not only for medicinal, for recreational use. And you hear these horror stories about people that are beginning to cook with cannabis and make mistakes. So I really want to get into that. But we are going to take a very quick 90-second break, and we're going to be back with Chef Jenn in a couple of seconds. Is that cool with you?
Yeah.
All right. We'll be right back. I'll be as quick as I can. All right, and we are back. See, I knew I'd get a use out of those break time things at some point. I also got to pop in one of these transitions every once in a while. There we go. We're back talking with Chef Jenn Cooks, personal chef and educator. You can follow her get her free 6-recipe seafood menu. I'm interested in finding a little bit about that at chefjenncooks.com. You can follow her across social media, Chef Jenn Cooks. And if you're watching, let's get a like check, homies. On anybody watching, make sure you're liking the stream. Make sure that you're following us on Facebook at 2AM Burrito so you get notified when we go live. Not only talking to filmmakers, not only talking to actors, not only talking to humanitarians, we're talking to chefs, we're talking to composers, we're talking about interesting people across all walks of life. Twitch.tv/2AM Burrito, YouTube.com/2AM Burrito, and just catching up on some comments. We have Hero 10 Ken in the house. He's one of my partners in our Cannabis channel, Podhead Etiquette. You can find us on podheadetiquette.com or Podhead Etiquette across social media as well. Thank you for watching, Mr. Ken. Thank you for Alex for his comments. He also says, her techniques sound legit. Thank you, Alex, for watching. And he said his favorite food was fried bologna sandwich. All right. So getting back into what we were talking about earlier, which is the sort of evolution of kind of the necessity of cooking. Society, and I guess the time that we're living in, can make people feel like, all right, let's say I go to the supermarket once a week. I buy my proteins, I buy my cereals or whatever for the mornings. I buy my little snacks here. I'm spending $150, $200 a week in food. I try to go get the organic vegetables and stuff like that. And then I have to go make it myself, which means I got to dedicate 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes at lunch, maybe an hour for dinner, maybe sometimes more. You know, that's 2-3 hours of your day when literally you could kind of budget yourself for that much and be like, I'm gonna go get my Grubhub, my Post, whatever. And basically, if you wanted to, society has put us in a position where you don't necessarily need to cook, right? So do you find that people that reach out to you might be stuck in that rut and are trying to find a way to get back to sort of living life more self-sufficient? How do you feel about that kind of societal norm these days? Can you expand on that for a little bit?
I like to think of it a lot like farming. Like there was a period in our lives in the 50s and 60s where we needed farmers, right? We didn't have big industrial ag. We needed farmers. And then, after the Vietnam War, we had more industrialization and we started having these giant factory farms and people stopped farming. And then I would say somewhere, around the mid 90s, we had this huge reboot of farming in America. And so now there's all these people that are like leaving the tech industry and becoming urban farmers. You get people who are becoming like beekeepers in Manhattan, like this whole resurgence in it. So I feel like the pendulum swings in different directions. There's going to be those people who grew up never having a home cooked meal. They've always eaten fast food. And then, there may just come a point in their life where they switch and they decide they really want to find that passion for cooking. I feel like with where we're at right now, the quarantine forced all of us to slow down. It forced all of us to start thinking about what we were doing. And it gave people an opportunity to do something that they had never done before, which for a lot of people was cooking from scratch. And I feel like there's this kind of resurgence now where people are starting to become passionate about where their food comes from and understanding how to cook it. And I don't know, it makes me really hopeful that like people are going to not just use the apps on their phone, but they're going to start cooking a couple meals for themselves and realize how much it is a form of self-care, feeding yourself and taking care of yourself. Like for me, for the longest time, I was talking about the drive-through America, like this idea that like everything in our lives has to be faster and easier. And, we were watching Rachel Ray doing 30-minute meals and we were doing everything quicker and faster and easier. And I feel like we've now reached the other end of that pendulum where it's like, whoa. Life does not need to be faster. It does not need to be easier. Like you made sourdough, now. Life does not need to be fast or difficult. Like you can slow down and enjoy it.
For me, I think that it's like, so I do these, and you were talking about performing, and even though it's an interview, I've been an actor, I've been a comedian, improv, I'm a director and stuff like that. But even though I'm talking to other people and trying to sort of promote their ideas, I still feel like this is a performance for me as an interviewer and as a personality. So after I finish a stream or an interview, I'm still hyped up. I still have the adrenaline running and stuff like that. I still sit here at my desk for an hour and a half, just sort of decompressing and stuff. And then that hunger hits. And then I'm like, okay, what do I have in the kitchen? What do I have that's defrosted? All right, I have steaks and I have stuff, but all right, that means I'd have to turn the oven on. All right, what can I make that's quick? So you're doing this sort of negotiation with yourself, which is how much of my time now is it worth for me to cook something that's healthier versus pushing a button? And usually it comes down to whether or not the amount of time that it would take me is plausible versus me thinking, okay, today I'll slip up and do stuff like that. But, oftentimes like in the mornings, it's more of like I have bread, I have eggs, I have bacon, I have sausage. I can make myself the same bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich, and it'll be even tastier than the one I can order here. So I have to sort of be like, okay, I'm going to grab my laptop, I'm going to take it into the kitchen, I'm going to put on a podcast, something that where I can multitask. So if I can sort of be engaged with music or a show or something like that while I'm cooking, then I think it makes it easier for me to sort of knock some sense into myself in order to sort of like make myself realize that, hey, you're a pretty good cook. Just go make yourself something, right? Does that resonate with you at all?
It does. And honestly, I had to write down the thought process that popped into my head, because this is a conversation I've been having with people right now. Is the idea that when you don't give an answer to a question, that's actually your answer. If you don't make the effort to organize out your food and your fridge, you're basically setting yourself up for failure. This is the weird thing that for some strange reason, we as human beings think that okay, we buy groceries, we put them in our fridge, and food will magically create itself from whatever we put in our refrigerators. You actually have to set an intention. You actually have to go to the store with a game plan. The minute quarantine hit, my mom does not cook. Honestly, when a lot of people are like, oh, where'd you learn to cook? It was not from my mom. It was cook or starve in my house. So I set my mom up. I went to Costco. I bought all of this meat. I portioned it. I marinated it. I put it into vacuum sealed bags and I froze it. And I was like, okay, here's meat for you. You can defrost it in under 5 minutes. All you need now is a starch and a vegetable. And you can cook pasta and you can find frozen vegetables. I had to set her up and organize her. So I feel for a lot of people at home, if you're not setting that intention, if you're not creating that space for yourself, what's going to happen is it's just going to be going and finding food when you're hungry, and you're going to scrounge for whatever you can get. And most likely that's going to be something that you can microwave or add hot water to. And then you're going to get on with your life. And then you're going to be like, why didn't I eat healthy? As opposed to if you actually went to the grocery store and bought things that you like to eat. I like to eat chopped vegetable salads. So even though I am a professional chef, I will go and buy 2 or 3 chopped veggie salads, already chopped up, already done, and in my fridge. So when I have that moment where I've been at work all morning and I forgot to eat and I have just been working my butt off and now I'm hungry, I have one of those salads in my fridge. And then I have something to satiate my hunger. Cool. Now I can actually cook. Now I can cook some chicken. Now I can cook some dinner. I just had to start figuring it out. And I feel for a lot of people, if you just take a little bit of time, I promise you, it sounds really complicated. It's not. Sit down and figure out 3 dinners you might want to make one week, 3 lunches you might want to make one week, 3 breakfasts you might want to make that week. And then prepare yourself to do that. You get up in the morning. I hate making breakfast. So I know the night before I have to soak oats in my refrigerator overnight so I can scoop it out. I need to make chia seeds. I need to literally take a baking dish and put scrambled scrambled eggs and cheese in the baking dish. So in the morning, I turn on my oven, I pop that in the oven, I hop in the shower. And by the time I get out of the shower, I have scrambled eggs for breakfast. You know, I have to plan these things so I know that I can do it. And then from there, it's just kind of like getting into that routine. I hate to sound so militant about it, but it drives me batty.
No, it makes sense because, you know, it's and I think obviously some of it is the munchies, some of it is people's lifestyles, stuff like that. But like, you know, but I go to both ends of the spectrum because I get lazy and I order a burrito because, you know, I'm up late editing and it's 2 a.m. and I don't want to sit in there and cook in my kitchen because I don't want to wake up my roommates and stuff and my dad. But at the same time, like right now, yesterday I had because one of the things my father taught me how to make is feijoada, you know, like Brazilian beans and stuff. So since yesterday, I've had some chunks of meat that I've been curing with salt outside, and I usually cure that for like a day and a half. You make the charque, and then I have.
What are you curing? I'm now you've got my interest. What are you curing? Tell me more.
Usually, like it'll be a mix of like stew meat, or like decent. Like if I have a steak, but that's not necessarily like a ribeye or something. Some like not super high quality like steak and stuff like that. So usually it's like stew beef, chunks of beef, sometimes even some short ribs or whatever. And then I have some sausages and some pig's feet that I'll put into it, and I have my beans that are soaking overnight in my kitchen today. So tomorrow I'm gonna make a big ass stew of feijoada with some white rice, and that's gonna be what I'm gonna eat for like the next 2 days. So I can make like elaborate stuff like that that'll be good. But then, you know, it's also, so I think just people rediscovering your love, like you said, of cooking and making a plan, really sitting down and planning out your meals, because everybody I think has the either mixed greens or baby spinach or cup of fruit that they buy every time they go to the grocery store, but just sits there. And then you're like, well, guess it's time to throw this out, you know, because you just didn't get around to doing anything.
And that's why when I tell people, I'm not trying to tell you that you have to go like full on fitness junkie and meal prep your entire life. Because let's be honest, most people are going to see that. Like even for me, I cannot stand meal prepping. I absolutely detest it because for me, if
I can't eat the same thing every day.
Yeah, if I had to eat the same thing every day, I would go postal. I would be on a roof tower with a gun. Like it would not be pretty. It would drive me insane. So I cannot stand meal prepping. But what I do think is really smart is just like, if when you go to the grocery store, instead of just like going in and being like, cool, I need eggs, I need milk, I need butter. What if it was like, okay, I'm going to make these 3 breakfasts. Okay, so I need to get bacon and cheese and eggs. Oh, and I'm going to make oatmeal. Okay, I need to buy the ingredients for 3 breakfasts. That doesn't mean you have to make the 3 breakfasts every day. That doesn't mean like you can make one day. Like out of 7 days a week, you may cook yourself breakfast 3 days and then give up for the other 4. I'm just saying, set yourself up for success, have the items there. You know, it's, to me, it just becomes a matter of, if you honestly, like most of us do enjoy cooking. It's just our lives don't allow us to do it every day and all the time. Don't get mad at yourself when you mess up one day. You can still go back. Like there's always going to be a tomorrow. So if you buy that steak and you don't cook it for yourself today, fine, do it tomorrow. You know, put it in the freezer. But like, do yourself a favor and cook yourself a couple of really nice meals, and you're going to find that you're going to start really enjoying it.
Good stuff. All right. So we're going to transition now into some questions and things that I want to talk to you regarding cannabis cooking. And that way we can wrap things up with a little bit more fun. So let's do another transition. We've reached the cannabis portion of our program. An hour, 15 minutes in, my demographics say that Republicans stop listening after 75 minutes. So I guess less hate. But like we said at the beginning, not only do you work with, not only are you a classically trained and advanced trained chef, but you also began to dabble into cannabis cooking classes, teaching people how to cook, how to experiment with cannabis. when did this start for you? Was it kind of the California legalization? Is it something that you've always, because I mean, people have known about like canna butter and the medicinal things for a long time before it became technically legal. But when did you immediately start? Like once you were a chef, you're like, ooh, I can add weed to this, or is it something that kind of later on you sort of discovered?
It's kind of a combination of things. When I first kind of got into it, I got into it medically. I was having some problems with my back, and honestly, just smoking was not enough to like get rid of the pain in my back. Smoking was great. It took the edge off. It mellowed me out, but it didn't give me like a full body high. So I really needed the edibles, and really strong edibles and RSOs and other things that like really help to relieve pain. The other element of it was the minute I started, honestly, even before smoking, just buying the flower and going in and smelling the flower and smelling the terpenes and like the flavor profiles like that. I mean, anyone who plays with food, like the minute you smell something, like my brain was like, oh, that's like piney. Oh, that's like pine nuts. Oh, I want this with pesto. Like my brain just started like instantly, like I tell people all the time, like I don't think of pot as like a drug. I think of it as just another like farm to table ingredient. Like if I can grow in my front yard and have a pot plant in my backyard, why am I not putting both in my food?
You want to hear something sad? I have the pesto taste like soap to me gene.
Oh no.
I don't know why. Like people have given me pesto. I'm like, did you wash this dish? Why does this taste like soap? And it's so maddening.
You are technically considered a super taster. So your
Really?
taste buds are so pronounced and so strong that certain, I want to say the word terpene, but not certain essential oils in those plants trigger your taste buds to where it tastes more floral than anything else. And so instantly your brain associates them with soap. Yeah, it's a thing. It's totally a thing.
Too smart for my own good, like I've always said.
Yep,
I'm gonna put that on. I'm gonna put that on my profile, though. Super taster.
Yeah, you are now officially a super taster. I told you so.
But yeah, the smell that you want to hear, which is funny, okay? Because do you recommend that people decarb their cannabis before they begin cooking?
Well, if you want to get high. I mean, to be totally honest with you, like, so you were just like, oh, we'll get more casual when we talk about cannabis. No, I turn into a major nerd. Like, I am a weed nerd.
I have my notes here, so I'm okay with smoking, because if I didn't, then I would forget where we were. But that's why I'm like, we're talking cannabis, I'm going to start smoking.
I'm a massive nerd when it comes to cannabis. So what we all know of cannabis, the cannabis flower, obviously have to smoke it in order to get high. It needs to be heated. It needs to be heated to activate the THC in order for you to get the psychoactive component. So if you were to take fresh flour and just throw it into a pan, and let's say you were making like pasta with butter, and you put the flour into that pan with your pasta and your butter, you would release some of the cannabinoids, you would release some of that THC, and it would bind to the fat in the butter, and it would make its way in, but you're really wasting most of that THC because you're not going to heat it long enough. You're not going to heat it hot enough. Like cannabis needs to get above a 250 degree mark for anywhere from 20 to 50 minutes in order to fully release all the THC, depending on the dryness of the cannabis and depending on the percentage of THC in it. You're welcome.
Well, no, I'm going to switch to my other camera so I can give you a kind of an idea what I do. So when I smoke and when I do, I have my can here, and then I break up my weed, and I always keep my stems here afterwards. And then what I'll do is I will keep. Let's switch back to my other camera right here so you can see me. I'll keep. So, but this is not necessarily any one specific type of cannabis because I smoke indica, sativa, hybrids, etc. And then I'll take some shake, some chunks, some stuff like that. I'll usually put some organic, like a stick and a half of some organic butter and some coconut oil maybe, a little bit of water, and then I'll slow cook that for maybe like 6 to 8 hours. But I don't decarb it before I start the slow cooking process. Am I making a mistake there, or is the slow cooking sort of do the same sort of process that the decarbing would do?
So this is kind of one of those things. There's a yes and a no to this. So the yes to this is that, yes, you are actually getting more terpenes, more fresh components that could conceivably be, what's called the entourage effects, which means you're not getting as much THC release, but you're getting these other cannabinoids and terpenes that are triggering different things in your body, creating an entourage effect or well-rounded different type of high. Whereas by heating your cannabis, you're releasing more of the THC, but you're not getting as much of the terpenes and the other things because you're cooking those off. So there's really two camps behind this. Like, I've most certainly taken my cannabis, put it into a mason jar. For me, I personally like the sous vide method because it allows me to just walk away. So I get basically a bucket full of water. This is going to look slightly dirty, so I apologize. This is my sous vide immersion circulator. So it goes in, I can set a temperature and a time. So I get the water up to 180 degrees. I put a mason jar in, I screw the lid on, and I put it into the water and I cook it for 6 to 8 hours. Now, because you're cooking it that long, you are heating and you are releasing, but you're never getting above 200 degrees. And if you don't get above 200 degrees, you're not fully releasing everything that's in it. So you are getting some of the cannabis. You are still getting a lot of the THC. You're just not getting all of it.
So I could technically decarb in the oven for like half an hour to 50 minutes, make sure that it doesn't go a certain temperature, and then begin the slow cooking process.
Yeah. So what I do, how I decarb my cannabis, and so here's the basic things. I tell people 3 things. There are basically 3 steps to creating your canna butter or any of your cannabis infusions. Step 1 is figuring out how you're going to decarb. And there's a couple methods, and I'll tell you mine in a moment. Step 2 is then figuring out what you're going to decarb, what you are going to infuse your cannabis into. So cannabis is hydrophobic, so it will not combine to water. It will bind to sugar and alcohol. So you can put it into butter, you can put it into coconut oil, or you could put it into coconut cream. You could put it in heavy cream, anything with a large amount of fat, or something like glycerin, something that's high in sugar, or something like alcohol. That's what it binds to. So once you figure out what you're going to bind it to, and then it becomes how are you going to make it? So you do it on the stovetop. Other people will do it in a crock pot. Some people do it in the sous vide like I do. And then, of course, there's all the machines like the Magic Butter or the Levo or the other infusion machines. For me to decarb my cannabis, what my personal preference is I take a sheet of aluminum foil, I put my bud on it, but I haven't fully ground it up. Like, I'll break it up into little pieces, but I don't grind it. I break it up into little pieces because I know by touch now how dry my cannabis needs to feel when it's fully decarbed. So I place all my bud onto aluminum foil. I then tent it, which means I crimp all the corners and make like an aluminum foil packet. What that does is it heats the cannabis, but any of the terpenes or any of the gases that come off are trapped inside of that tent. And as it cools, it's almost like sweat. It kind of absorbs back into the cannabis a little bit. So I try and keep as much of like the flavors and the really cool extra added benefits. Once
basically making your weed do hot yoga.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. My weed's doing hot yoga in my oven. And then depending on the percentage of THC is how hot or low temperature my oven is at. And then the length of time is how fresh or how old my cannabis is. And then once it's cooked, I basically, because I'm a nerdy chef, I crumble it in my fingers. And when I crumble it, it's 2 things. 1, it's breaking it up so I can release more kind of like surface area to bind to the oil. But also, 2, I can actually feel with my fingers when that cannabis is dry enough that I know that it's fully decarbed and it's literally like lawnmower clippings. Like there's nothing really left to it. All the cannabis is brought out.
And then you finish, and then what you strain it, put it through your cheesecloth, etc.
Once it's been decarbed, then it gets combined with whatever liquid I have, and I do my infusion method. And actually, I originally did cheesecloth, and what I've actually recently found I like even more is I use a coffee filter. I have like a little a tiny little strainer that sits right on top of a mason jar, but I've also done it in my actual like drip coffee thing. And I put a coffee filter and I pour it in. Because the cheesecloth does have holes in it and you have to kind of layer it up, you end up getting like little bits of bud or tiny bits that kind of make their way through. Whereas the coffee filter is so fine, no particles come through. It's just oil.
That's $8 I'm not getting back from Amazon. Oh, I had coffee filters and I went and bought cheesecloth. Damn it. What is so do you have a preference in terms of butter or coconut oil or avocado oil work as well?
Honestly, it's just depending on what I want to do with it. You know, if I know that I want to make an infused caramel or infused lemon curd, I want butter. If I know that I'm going to, you know, avocado to me is like a high heat cooking oil, so I really wouldn't use avocado oil too much. But I know, like, if I want to drizzle something, like if I want to dip bread, I'm going to use a really good quality olive oil and then add in some other like garlic, like dried garlic and dried rosemary and dried red chili flakes while I'm doing the infusion process. And then when I'm done, I basically have Italian seasoned oil that I can just dip my bread into.
So for classic, for like brownings and stuff, butters is fine. But if you're going to get fancy with it, then you're going to start. I used to like to make the 420 burgers, since you get like the nice, like an 80-20 nice beef with a lot of fat into it that you can sort of like cook in some good can of butter and just sit there and eat some nice ass burger.
The minute you mention brownies, I have to, because we talked like briefly, we kind of, before we got started, we talked about the mistakes that people make. My biggest thing is inevitably someone goes, okay, I'm going to make weed brownies. And they, you know, if they've gotten smart enough and they've gotten past the point of just putting weed directly into a box of like Pillsbury brownie mix, because I did that. Like my first batch of pot brownies was literally buying a box of brownie mix and putting weed into it and then baking in the oven and thinking I was making pot brownies. I did that when I was like 15. But then once you've made the butter and you go to make this brownie, inevitably someone goes, okay, I made weed butter. The recipe calls for butter. I'm going to use all weed butter. And then they get high as shit. Here's my thing for you. If you're making cannabis butter, what you want to do is take like 1/4 teaspoon of that butter, put it into like a cup of hot cocoa, put it onto a piece of toast, and see how high it gets you. If that 1/4 teaspoon of cannabis butter gives you a nice buzz, then you know you're going to use, if your brownie makes 16 brownies, you're going to put 16 1/4 teaspoon into that brownie mix, because that means you're going to get a nice comfortable high, as opposed to doing the whole recipe in just cannabis butter. Like, you can use regular butter and cannabis butter. It does not have to be all weed butter, and you don't have to make brownies that put people on the floor.
Cut to 2 weeks ago. Funny you should mention that, but I made about 1.5 sticks of organic butter with a ton of cannabis that I had, probably a tray full like this. And like I said, I slow cooked it for about 6 to 8 hours. I made some brownies, and I realized that I was putting twice the amount of butter that the recipe called for, and it was all can butter. I ate one brownie. I fell asleep. I woke up higher than I had ever been, like in the last several years. I woke up and I didn't even think. I had a blunt rolled in front of my desk for like a day and a half. I didn't even think about lighting it because I was high. I was high for a day and a half, and I smoke heavy. Yeah. So in order for me to kind of mess myself up with, but I'm happy to do that because that's kind of the effect I wanted. I had just gotten done with a whole bunch of interviews for the San Diego Latino Film Festival. I had a day off, and I was like, "Cool,
you're good.
I'm good." That's what I wanted. But I tried to sit at my desk to like write an email out, and I was just like kept like misspelling stuff. So that could be a good bad problem. But that is a good tip for people not to overdo it when they want, because we've all heard that old school recording. I think it was where it was on like E-Bombs World or whatever the old school platforms was, but about the cops that ate the brownies that they had confiscated, and then they thought the world had stopped and they were dead. And the other classic mistake, which everybody should know about this point, is eat the brownie, wait an hour and a half or something like that, see how it hits you, because that's another problem that I had, which is the reason I had to stop buying. They made the sour straw weed sort of cut, because I wouldn't realize that they were weed, and I would just sit there and eat them like a snack. And next thing I know, I ate an entire pack, right?
So these are the two things I tell people all the time. One, when I get my friends high for the first time, like, let's just be honest, when they're like, I want to try an edible, I'm going to go to Jen because she's going to help me do this. Generally what I do is I'll give them an edible, like a small piece of an edible or a small dose edible, like literally like a gram, like a milligram or half a milligram. Like I never give anyone like 5 milligrams on their first try. No. Like we're going to start at like a half or 1 milligram. But what I am going to do is I am going to like feed you that edible, and then you're going to smoke a bowl, because now you want to get high. So I'm going to make you high. You're going to smoke a bowl, and now you're high, and you're not thinking, oh my God, this brownie's not working. Oh my God, I got to eat another one. Oh my God, what do I? No, you're not. You're going to be high. And then by the time the high from smoking that bowl wears off, you're going to start to feel that high from your edible. And then there's like, if someone I know is really freaking out, then I give them like some straight like CBD isolate that has nothing but CBD in it. And it doesn't necessarily get rid of your high. Like a lot of stuff is out there talking about how CBD gets rid of your high. It's a non-psychoactive form of cannabis, but really what high doses of CBD do is just really relax you and mellow you out. So all it does is it takes the anxiety of your high away and just helps you to relax. And on that note, what I tell people every time when someone asks me like, oh my God, like you've got to have like that story where you just got really, really messed up and it was awful. And I'm like, no, like I've never had a bad edible experience. And the reason why I can say that is because I know how to have this conversation with myself. And the conversation goes, you're fine, you're high, go to bed.
Drink a glass of milk or something.
When I get really, really high, like I've done it. Like, trust me, I started making these like burnt orange hash caramels. They were incredible. They were amazing. And I made a batch once and the sugar crystallized. And I was like, oh no, like I can't sell these and I can't give them to friends. And I'm like, I'm just going to eat it. And I started like licking the spoons and eating it. And it got so good that I just kept eating and kept eating. And my roommate at the time came home and was like, you and the cat were on the couch and you looked identical. Like just sprawled on the couch. And no matter how high I was, it was just like, okay, you're fine, relax, you're just stoned, go to bed, everything will be okay. And that's the conversation and a mantra I tell everyone. Like if you ever are scared that like you had too much cannabis, you've had too much edibles, you've smoked too much, sit yourself down and have that conversation.
It's good advice. Do you make specific, or do you find that specific strains work better in certain dishes? Like if you're gonna make brownies, or I mean, like I like to smoke a blend. I call it my mystery jar, where no matter what kind of weed I get, I'll throw it in here, and eventually all mixes in together, because I love a high-low. I love indica mixed with a hybrid with a sativa. I don't know. People call them Lou's salad blunts, and they're like, I can't smoke a blunt with you, Lou, because it's always this fucking salad, and I'm sitting there chilling, and they're like, you know what I mean? But from a technical nerdy standpoint, is there a strain that works better for specific types of cooking?
So certain strains are going to have flavor profiles that, like, if you're getting into some sativas, you're going to find that they're going to have more of a piney, like sharper bite to them. Some indicas may have kind of a milder flavor profile that's maybe more lemony. To me, it's really about kind of smelling the terpenes. And if you're going to make your own cannabis butters using flower, you're going to want to make sure that you have like a flavor profile that's going to work with whatever you're doing. For me, I really think everyone's high is different. Everybody likes different cannabis. You know, it's like anything else in life. Like there's a preference that works for you. And if you like it, like for me, I love the flavor of weed. I can taste it. I'm happy to like taste weed in my food. And then there's other people that like when they have cannabis, they want it to taste nothing like weed. So to me, it's really about whatever really works for you. No, I don't feel like. Yeah, I love the taste. And I personally, I think it's hysterical that you like make these crazy joints that no one knows what they're getting into. Because I have a friend of mine, we went to do yoga. We did a cannabis yoga. And I was all excited to like meditate and like go into my happy place. And like right before we just started this huge group circle of like passing around joints. Like everyone who had brought some weed, we just started passing it around. And the next thing I know, I get into yoga and I'm on like the roller coaster. Like 1 minute I'm planning my entire life. The next minute I'm taking a nap. Next minute I'm high as a kite. Like I was like, damn, I should have just had an indica and called it a night.
Well, depending on what I got lucky to roll with in this one, we'll figure out how the rest of the interview goes, whether I start zoning out or nodding out while you're answering. Do you think that you can see the day in the near future where you would go to a party post-COVID and grab a joint that a stranger passed you? Do you think that? Yeah. Do you think that's coming back?
No. I mean, I will say for me personally, the answer to that question is no. I will say on the other end of the spectrum, I do have friends. Like I've become part of a lot of different cannabis groups, like cannabis networking groups, cannabis women groups. And a lot of these people have not changed their practices whatsoever. I mean, I remember during lockdown, going to a friend's birthday party, and we were like socially distanced in a backyard, like everyone was in a chair in a giant loop. And one of my cannabis girlfriends like had a Puffco dab rig, and she was like, "Oh, does anyone want a dab?" And I'm like, "You think I'm going to put my mouth around that thing that's just been in your mouth?" Like, no, not in a million years.
It's defeating the purpose.
Yeah. So I feel like, you know, for some people, you know, it's still going to be there. I'm honestly excited to see the future of where this goes, because I feel like before COVID, you know, you'd have like a cannabis event or something like that. And, you know, companies would not want to necessarily spend the money to give every person an individual joint, or maybe they didn't want to like spend the money to like give it for each individual person. And I feel like now the creativity comes with like, okay, does every person get a micro joint? And, you know, are we going to do like really interesting individual, like, you know, vape balloons? Like I love, like my thought the minute we went into COVID is that someone needs to come out with an individual balloon on a string where you could like vape the cannabis into a tiny balloon. And when someone walks in, each person gets a balloon on the string and they get their own balloon and they just inhale. Like they don't have to smoke a joint. They don't have to touch anyone else. They just get their own thing on a string and they each get to inhale.
Nice. Like a helium party?
Yeah, except with weed.
You ever had a helium party on weed? When you and one of the things that's interesting, you know, that you mention it is that you know, there is this other layer to this where there's states in the United States where you could get in trouble for doing the things that you're doing, or people can get put in jail from stuff like that. One of the documentary filmmakers that I got a chance to interview doing this last San Diego Latino Film Festival did a documentary about an organization called Mamar. It's an organization in South America, like Chile, Mexico, Colombia, where it's these mothers that are growing cannabis for CBD tinctures for their kids that have like epilepsy and stuff like that. And they're getting in trouble with like the cartels and the government, and the cartels are like, we see that you're growing and we know that you're growing for your kids. The minute you start, if we find out that you're selling, you're fucked. And then the government is like, listen, we're going to take away your kids if you, you know, if we find out that you're still growing this plant that's been, you know, technically called illegal. So, I was just talking about what we're talking about. It's just weird to sort of think of, and this is the joint speaking, obviously, but just about the fact that, that we are in essence, very privileged to be in a state like California, where we can freely talk about the fact that we are cooking, smoking for recreational purposes, for medicinal purposes, and that we're kind of talking about the science of marijuana, of cannabis, which is incredible to me. I'm sorry, I just thought that came to me right now.
No. Trust me, I've traveled, like I went to Cuba and I had to literally go through every single piece of my luggage to make sure there was no weed in anything by accident, because I would go to prison if I had any weed on me in Cuba. And I still bought CBD edibles, I'm not going to lie. But
I mean, that's a technicality. It's psychoactive.
It's like a gummy bear. Who's gonna know?
Who's gonna do it? That's fine.
But that's the thing. Like, it's really sad. But beyond the fact that, like, I hate to, like, it's really sad to me. Like, I love the privilege that I have. I love that I am openly promoting doing a THC class for a group of moms in Northern California, like this weekend. Like, I love that I can be there and I can talk about this stuff. But it also really makes me sad that at the same time, there's people in prison in this country right now because they had more weed than I currently have on my dining room table. And they're in prison for, like, the next 10 years. And they'll never be able to vote again. And they may not be able to find a job again. Like, there's so many things that are so wrong about that to me. And, I'm just really, really hoping that, again, COVID has made me this, like, incredibly hopeful person, but, like, cannabis was an essential item. Like, my mom was like, oh, no, you do what you want to do, but I'm not going to. My mom now has edibles. Like, since COVID, my mom has edibles next to her bed to help her sleep at night. I feel like because it was an essential item and because the world just went upside down, everyone needed to find a way to relax. Everyone needed to start exploring this medicinal relaxation. And I really fully believe that within the next election cycle, if it goes correctly, it will be federally legal.
Legalize it. We've been saying that for a very long time. I just had a couple of final things that I wanted to touch on, a couple of short questions that I had. But the concept obviously is, you're doing private chef tutorials, just to double check and make sure that we're following you at the right place. Chef Jenn Cooks, www.chefjenncooks.com. If people are still do people still type in the www? Nobody really types that in anymore, right? We can issue that. Yeah. And then at Chef Jenn Cooks, make sure you add the S, as I had forgotten. What is the most, I have a couple of questions here, underrated kitchen appliance that you use all the time?
The most underrated kitchen appliance that I use all the time, I would say a fish spatula. And I mean that a fish spatula is essentially a regular spatula, except it is more flexible and it's kind of angled in a triangular shape. And I have a fish spatula that's got, specifically for a non-stick pan, so it's got a little bit of rubber on one side. But I mean, I use that for steak. I use it for fish. I use it for, like, as a heat resistant, like, spatula to stir stuff in the pan. The other one, I'm not going to lie, I went to the Mercado in Tijuana a couple years ago and I got a bunch of these, like, big metal spoons, and I use that spoon for everything. Like, if I need to taste a soup, if I need to stir something, if I need to scoop out ice cream, like, that metal spoon is my savior.
Your go-to.
Spoon is everything to a chef.
There you go. And have you ever considered or applied or been a part of any sort of cooking competitions and shows?
So I have applied, and I did go through the vetting process for the next Food Network star. I didn't make it through, and I have to be honest, people have asked me a couple times if the show's allowed me to smoke weed, or if I could get a year's supply of Xanax for the 3 months I was on it, then I would do it. Otherwise, these shows, they're just a giant anxiety nutshell, and I don't know if I want to put myself through that.
You know what my favorite crazy cooking show is, and I don't know if it's even on anymore. There was this, I believe it's Korean cooking show, and it's like what's in my fridge, and it's Korean like celebrities, like pop stars and stuff, and they go to their house and they hijack their fridge, and then they bring them onto the show, and then there's like 5 chefs and some comedians, and they open up their fridge and they make fun of them, make fun of all the stuff they have in their fridge. And it's some shit that I've never even heard about. It's like, oh, you eat pig testicles and the sprout of a ginger tree that only grows on a certain mountain or something like that. Or they have like pre-made kimchi in there that their mom made them and stuff like that. Like it's, and then the celebrity chefs, and it's usually 5 Korean chefs and 1 American chef that speaks Korean. They bid on who gets to cook. So they basically take all the ingredients in one of the celebrity stuff, and then they have to make a meal for them.
I love this. I'm gonna need to watch
with her. So, but it's funny because they put like all these different like crying faces over the people. It's a very like that. So I'm just saying, an edible or a joint and that show, and that's a good capper to an evening. I'm just like, because you'll laugh your ass off.
I think we need to recreate that show in America. Like, I would love to go to some celebrity's house, make fun of them for what's in their fridge, and then be like, okay, now that I've made fun of you, let's cook a meal and hang out and get stoned.
Yeah, it's like, here, Brad Pitt, here's your fridge. Ha ha. You got, I don't know what the hell would Brad Pitt eat. He eats in every movie, right? What do you feel about in terms of the concept of food as a memory? Because I think people have a lot of food is a very personal thing. Sometimes it's a defense mechanism. Sometimes it's a reaction. People use food for tons of different stuff. But in most cases, I believe that it's, they can also evoke a memory, like, for actors, for people like that. What's your concept of that?
Oh, I'm a firm believer in food memories. Like it's another form of sensory memory. You have a touch memory, you have a taste memory, you have a visual memory. It's just another form of sensory reminder. I'm a firm believer. I have tons. I mean, I can remember flavors and tastes of places that I've been. All right, here's how sketchy and weird this gets. Okay. I was a little kid and I put a penny in a light socket and then stuck my tongue in it. It sounds really weird. But it gave me the taste of metal. Like, I could actually taste the penny. And to this day, while talking to you, I can still taste that penny telling you this story.
Okay. Well, I mean, sensory memory is the thing. I got drunk once off of like bottom shelf liquor for one of my birthdays. We were drinking. We had a big ass baseball cup, like a super extra large cup, filled with ice, bottom shelf, like triple charcoal distilled, like Vaughn's brand vodka, and Sunny Delight. Not even orange juice. Sunny Delight, which is not even technically water or orange juice. It's like a weird hybrid between the two. So we drank an entire gallon of that, and then at some point we ran out of orange juice. So we just kept drinking the vodka straight. And I've never been hungover. It was the only time in my life I had an audition in the city. I had to take the train from Queens to Manhattan, and every time that the train rocked, it felt like somebody was smashing my head in. I didn't realize that all I needed to do was drink water. So because I was a stupid kid. So I didn't drink anything. I was just in pain all day. I didn't realize smoke some water, drink some water, smoke a joint, you'll be fine. And I can still taste. I still can't drink anything. People say, I can't drink but the finest of vodkas, because anything that has a hint of that vodka has to taste like nothing for me to like vodka. So I definitely believe in sensory memory and being able to bring that up. For food, it's just a weird thing because it's something that makes people homely. And I can imagine that it's also a treat, for example, if you're cooking for somebody, to be able to evoke those types of emotion. And when you're feeding people, because when I make a movie, I like to sit in the back of the crowd and hear people laugh. There's nothing like sitting in the theater and watching people laugh at something you wrote or a joke hitting the right way. Do you take pleasure in basically watching people eat your meals?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, I'll go even like one step further. Like because I'm generally in the kitchen. So if I can, like, I like to kind of see out and see how people are reacting. I always tell clients that like total silence is the greatest compliment to a chef because they can't even like talk to each other. You know, they're too busy. There could be a table of like 15 people and they're too busy just enjoying the food to even speak to one another. You know, there's all these like little sensory cues. And yeah, as a chef, you know, the greatest thing in the world is when a plate comes back into the kitchen and it's completely empty. Like that's my happy place. When they have literally licked that plate clean, I know they loved it.
I mean, in overall, I think you've probably cooked for other people more than you cooked for yourself over your lifetime, right? You think you've reached that point?
I would have said that before quarantine, but when I cook myself breakfast, lunch, and dinner every single day.
It's shifting the other way. It's shifting.
Yeah. But I will say, like, that's kind of one of the things I find really funny is how many people, like, especially like, let's be honest, when dating, like there's inevitably that guy who's like, oh, I'm so intimidated, I can't cook for you. And I'm like, I will never say no to a home cooked meal that I do not cook myself. Like, I am perfectly happy if anyone wants to cook for me, I will happily eat a home cooked meal that I don't have to cook.
All right, that brings up the question: what's more intimidating, dating a cook or dating a porn star? Which one would kind of, you know, it's two important things: sex and food. So you know, you're gonna get intimidated one way or the other.
I'd rather date a chef than a porn star. Like I feel like porn stars, like, you know, you shouldn't turn sex into a job. That should just be fun. You know, it should not be a career.
They've gone too far. One of the things that I saw is that you were teaching people about our charcuterie board, which is hard to say, but much, much more fun to eat. Tell us about that.
So I have been doing these virtual cooking classes, and it's not just a cooking class. I feel like a lot of times with these group classes, you don't want to do something super, super complicated. So we show you how to build a charcuterie board. And if you don't know what a charcuterie board is, just a really fancy French term for a meat and cheese board. So we do 2 different types of cheeses, 2 different types of meats. We talk about why we pick what we pick so that you understand creating the flavor profiles. And then we talk about all the other items on the board. So like how something acidic, like a pickle, will cut through the fat of the meat. Or why you'd want to put something sweet, like a honey, so that it complements the richness and creaminess of the cheese. And then we talk about the crackers, the nuts, and the other things. And we show how to decorate a really beautiful charcuterie board. And what's really fun about doing something like this with a group of friends is essentially they log in, I set everything up, I show them how to make it. And then while you guys chit chat and laugh and nibble and make these boards, then I log off, I leave it open, and they just drink and eat cheese together and hang out and chit chat.
Hey, sounds like fun. Do you give them like a shopping list first, or like a link to like a Amazon Fresh kind of list or something?
So if they're local in San Diego, I can partner up with a local cheese shop that will put together an entire package for them that they can just go to that cheese shop and pick it up. If they're not local and they want to do the shopping themselves, I send them with every class that I do, whether it's the charcuterie class or whether it's my truffle class or trifle class or whether it's a cannabis class. Like the best one is I'm doing this cannabis class coming up. They got their traditional grocery shopping list. They got their tool and equipment list. And then they got their dispensary shopping list. So it was a list of things that they would need in order to make the items that we're making. And then because, of course, cannabis isn't federally legal, I gave them a full list of, like, if they're outside of the state of California, what CBD products were available, because CBD is now available nationwide. But, yeah, if you're looking to do one of these classes, there's always a way for us to figure out how to, you know, put together an Amazon-based shopping list, how to do a local shopping list, and how to make sure that you guys can get everything for the class. And then you log in, and I teach you how to do it.
So you do personal chef where you can kind of be hired on by a rich family to come cook for them for a month, or I could just be there and just have you make me burritos all day, which sounds awesome. Yeah. And do they give you like a visa or something so you can do the shopping, or do you give them a shopping list and it goes to the other personal assistant?
So if I'm doing something for a month, obviously we're talking about some sort of like financial commitment, either through a credit card or some kind of financial deposit. But traditionally, with most of like my little private dinners, like if I'm doing someone's 30th birthday party or I'm just doing a private dinner for 2 people, what we do is we create the menu, we talk about the price for the whole menu, and then I do 50% deposit up front that covers all of my costs going in, and then 50% paid on the day of the event. So that way I know that when I'm buying everything for your event, those costs are covered for, and then afterwards we're just finishing off the payment.
And you can do like customizable events where people, like you said, like obviously you have the skills to be able to do a precision missile based, menu for taking into account people's dietary supplements. Like that's something that I would need maybe for like a movie set, because there's always, half the actors are vegan and some are pescatarian and blah blah blah, and somebody can only eat raw salads and somebody's on a diet. So I just thought.
Yeah, I would say like 90% of what I do is private custom menus. Like when someone calls me, like even like a small dinner for 2, I had a couple reach out to me recently, and it was like, okay, well, we want to do something with cannabis, so we ended up doing like a cannabis mocktail, and then she wanted to try something they'd never tried before, so then we did mussels, and then we went from there. We created a menu. In the same respect, yeah, I had a really great client. His wife was like an Instagram influencer, and then like him and all of his buddies, they were like old hockey buddies. So when we did a buffet, it was like we had to have this like entirely vegan, all natural, vegetable based stuff for her, and then for like him and his guy friends, like steak and potatoes. So like I have zero issue putting it all in one thing.
Oh, and then obviously people can reach out to you and find you. Let me get your banners up for this since we're wrapping it up. Follow her at Chef Jenn Cooks if you want to get a customized vegan, non-vegan cannabis infused. I want to do a half cannabis infused, half CBD infused pescatarian brunch.
Gotcha.
But whatever you need, she'll be there for you. And then you can find out more about her videos, her cooking life at chefjenncooks.com. Last question for you today, Chef Jenn. The Food Network comes to you, right? Mm-hmm. And they say, Chef Jenn, we got a half-hour cooking show that we want you to host about cannabis cooking. We're going to guarantee you 1 season, and then we'll see how it goes. But a rich restaurateur wants to give you the option of opening a chain of cannabis cooking restaurants at legal states across the USA. What do?
I take the show.
You take the show?
I've never wanted to own a restaurant. I do not want to get into the restaurant business. That's not my thing. Restaurants, for some people, they love the lifestyle. They love the business. I like going to restaurants. I like hanging out with my friends who work in restaurants. I like not working in a restaurant.
That's like they say, don't be the guy with the boat, be the guy with the friend that has the boat, right? You don't want to be the person that owns the boat.
You do not want to be the person who owns the restaurant, but you do want to be friends with every person who owns a restaurant, because then you get all the perks and none of the downside. Yeah, I firmly agree on that one.
All right. And then I see here that you have an event this Sunday, right? Called the Art of Cannabis Infusion, a mocktail experience with Chef Jenn Felmley. Is it Felmley?
Yep.
Okay.
So the mocktail experience, we still have tickets available for that. It's you've got 3 different options. One, if you live in the Sacramento area, you can join an in-person event that's limited to 10 people. If you are in the state of California and you would like to cook along, or if you live in a state that has recreational or medical cannabis, you can do a $25 ticket that gets you the recipes, shopping list, tools, and equipment, and you can cook along with us. Or if you just want to kind of tune in and watch what we're doing, there's a $10 ticket where you can log in and watch everything and kind of get a little bit of cannabis education, as well as learn how to make a horchata in cold brew infused with THC and cannabis garnishes.
Damn. You know what? I consider myself a cannabis advocate and somebody who's obviously, been about the legalizing movement for a long time. And it's incredible that we're able to have this conversation like out in the open and stuff like that because, where we live. And I've learned a lot about, some stuff, especially cooking related. So I appreciate you coming on, even though we got to the 2-hour mark. I think this is probably my longest pod. We hit the 2-hour mark, so congratulations to us. But I've had you long enough, Chef Jenn. I really appreciate you coming on. One last time for the people, make sure that we get this branding here at the end. Is Chef Jenn Cooks.com. Follow her at Chef Jenn's Cook. My name is Lou Martinez, aka Big Chief Burrito, and you can follow me on Facebook.com/2amburrito, TwitchTV.2amburrito, YouTube.com/2amburrito. And you can find our show on Podbean.com by guess what you would look for. Just guess. Just guess what you would look for. You'll figure it out. Thank you very much for coming on the stream. I'm glad we got a chance to do it out. And I hope that things change quickly in this country so that I can attend one of your events in person or have you cook for my team at a future film event.
That would be amazing. I'd love to.
I hope you had fun.
I really did.
All right, cool. Well, great conversation. Thank you, everybody, for watching. This has been Big Chief Burrito. Make sure that you follow us for the next stream. I need to take a day off. I'm about to eat an edible, smoke the rest of this joint, relax. Maybe because I talked about it, I might go look up that Korean cooking show I recommended for everybody. So thank you, Chef Jenn. Thank you, everybody, for watching Big Chief Burrito.